and I'm the secretary of the ISBHF, so I'm not very used to doing presidential things, but I gotta do them today. I had to step in. Our president Elio Pascuso, unfortunately, is ill with a chest infection, so he wouldn't be able to join us here in Buffalo. So I'm stepping in to essentially give the word on behalf of the ISBHF, and I would like to thank Alessandro and everyone who's involved in planning this event for a great initiative. So thank you very, very much. Thank you also to our speakers for joining us today, and obviously all of us we're going to join the working groups and the initiatives that everyone has put together. I like the t-shirt that you're wearing, Strong Women's, Strong Sport. I would like to begin with that for a short time, because obviously the sport has been, I don't want to say dominated, but predominantly a men's affair, really. And you can see that on the number of teams, number of nations that participate in our events as well. And so obviously this is, I wouldn't say a start, but really we're, I think, at the beginning of a process here where we see a lot of youth participation coming up in many nations. And I'm from the Czech Republic myself, and I can see how the women's sport has really grown there in the last 5 years. The national team getting stronger, the youth national teams always playing well, and that comes really from the youth levels. Now they had a under 14, under 16 team, and I see a lot of that happening in North America as well. When I speak to US, to Canadian representatives, that the push now really is to start with youth participation in the women's game. And I think that's something that's going to come up a lot. And in the ISBHF, at the last annual general meeting that we had in Liberec 2 months ago, we're actually not officially yet. We're actually planning on introducing another girls category in the junior age, which I think is a great step forward to give them an opportunity really to experience what you all are experiencing and have been experiencing at the women's events. So not only having one, but 2 women's categories, I think will help that, and will also inspire other nations to join the sport as well, I would think. Obviously, we have been missing some of the powerhouses to join in the women's division, but I think that is coming with the Worlds being in Switzerland next year, for instance. I think there's something we can really look forward to, and I think we're on a good trajectory. And that's why I'm happy that we're having this event as well, because that only shows that there's a lot of interest and a lot of initiative to make that happen and to grow the women's sport. So I'm thankful for this event and all of you being involved and pushing it forward. Yeah, for this event, I really look forward to, from the ISBHF side, obviously there's a survey that's come up, so all the data. And I also look forward to, I would say, some sort of action plan, because obviously we are very much involved in the high levels of international sport, but not really on the grassroots level, but really the work happens with, like I said, from the young ages to the senior ages. So getting those ideas and inputs from you, where you know best what's got to be done in order to grow the women's game, I think it's going to be very, very beneficial for us to see that and understand it, and then take the next steps and actions to make that happen on the international stage as well, based on your input. And the last thing I want to say, and I've told that to Alessandra before, this is a pilot for me. You may say this is, the first Global Women's Summit, but we have a lot of people watching from Europe at home as well. But we really have 2-3 nations sitting here now. But I think if this goes well and we get all the plans and the input that we look forward to, I think next year when we're in Switzerland, when we have also the other nations present in person, that can have a much greater impact. So I just, fingers crossed, hope this goes well, and then we can build on that and grow the women's sport together. So thank you very much for having me, and enjoy the event.
So I was saying it's kind of weird to be on this side of a podium versus in front of a net, because I'm usually in front of the goalie net. So bear with me. But I just wanted to welcome all of you today, online as well as in person. I think this is an amazing just an amazing vision that we had. Let's have a summit, you know, and let's bring people together. We had no idea. We were thinking this would be something local, you know, with just basically our players here in the US. And instead, it turned into a great opportunity to get everyone together globally. And I'm so excited to welcome you all to the first Global Women's Summit. So thank you again. So as I mentioned, and I'm not sure if everyone knows, but my name's Alessandra. I've been a longtime player for Team USA for a long time. And I'm also the founder of the United Women's Ball Hockey Foundation. So we call that UWS because it's kind of a mouthful, but UWS was established in 2015. And it was basically just a reaction where women weren't really getting the coaching, the skills clinics and things like that, that we just thought would help develop the game. And has now turned into this global initiative to help grow the women's community. So we're doing that by inclusivity, equity, community, and opportunity. So we're, again, so excited to be able to present this to you guys today and just have this be the start of hopefully many more conversations, and also have you guys have a voice in the women's game and the growth of the women's game. And we feel that that's really important. It's like I said, it's the first initiative to try something like this. And as David had mentioned, it's really important to hear your perspectives, right? We're the women that are playing. We have different challenges globally, and just understanding what those challenges and barriers are, and just to help lift those. So we're really excited to have you all here today. And I'm so excited to welcome our keynote speakers, 3 doctors from Temple University that are going to provide some insight on the women's game and women in business. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, y'all, thanks for having us. So what we're going to do today is 2 parts. The first part, we're going to talk about how and why women in sport is good business. And then the second half, Dr. Blair is going to lead us through a little bit of a workshop. We have some questions that we want to pose to all of y'all here, as well as the folks online. So we'll take, again, the first part, we'll do some Q&A at the end of it. We'll break, kind of reshuffle, get you seated in a little bit different of a way, and then we'll get into the workshop for the second part. So 4 things I want to do today. I want to do some introductions and welcome you here, share some data. Thanks to everyone who filled out the survey. I want to share some of that with you, kind of help set the stage about what we're going to talk about, and then helped create some of the questions that we're going to do on the back end. We're going to talk about supporting women in sport, and then why women in leadership is good business. And then finally, like I said, we're going to end with the workshop. So just going to do a couple quick introductions. On the far end, Dr. Deborah Blair is a professor and the director of ODEI at Temple University. Hello, folks. Dr. Blair has been at Temple for a while, working in the School of Sport Tourism and Hospitality Management. She does a lot of work around Philly, specifically working with Parks and Rec, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And she teaches a number of our first-year courses, kind of building that foundation for our students, covering topics that we as a school think are really, really important and think our students should have an understanding of. Former college volleyball player, so I'll put a little bit of context into how we got here, the things that we do. But Dr. Blair was a former college volleyball player. In the middle right here, we have Dr. Ashley Gardner, who just finished her first year as a faculty member. So starting year 2 as a faculty member, recent grad. Recent grad of the University of Tennessee. She worked for, prior to getting her doctorate degree, she worked for USA Fencing, so has some experience working in kind of the international level of sport as well. Does a lot of research when we jump into kind of talking about women in sport, supporting women in sport. She does a lot of research on organizational culture and building up folks who want to move into leadership positions within sporting organizations. And I am Dr. Lizzie Taylor. I'm also an assistant professor at Temple in the School of Sport Tourism and Hospitality Management. I do a lot of work on the underrepresentation of women in coaching and athletic administration positions, and then also organizational culture. So a little bit about us before we jump in. We just want to give a huge thanks to the folks who organized this. So Karen and Beth, Alexandra meeting. We met today in person for the first time, and I felt like I've known them for a really long time. So I was so excited to finally connect in person. But we've been talking about this for several months now, just meeting pretty much weekly, trying to figure out what we want to accomplish here. What are the main questions that we want to get answered, and how do we really want to hear the voices of the folks who are on the ground doing the really hard work. So again, just a huge thank you for having us here and working with us over the last couple months to set this up. We're really excited to be here and kind of share some of our insights with all of you and hear about your experiences. So I want to share some data, and I'm going to put this up here. I'm a data nerd. I don't even care. I have a master's in stats. I love numbers so much. So I was really happy to collect the data, to analyze the data, and put this together. So over the next couple slides, I want to share a little bit with you about what the data said. So we had representation from a number of different countries, folks in a number of different positions. So coaches, players, athletic administrators, referees, folks who are here in person, folks who are joining us via Zoom. So lots of perspectives that we're able to share with you. And if you remember, if you filled it out, if you remember those questions where you were asked about the percentage of men and women in the different roles, this really sets it up perfectly for the first part of our presentation here, thinking about how sport, and more specifically thinking about how ball hockey is male dominated across all of the different positions, right? So you can see the first one there, 72% of participants reported that their local ball hockey community was 75% or more male players. So again, this asks just the very general, in your local community across all the levels, what percentage of that was men, 75% or more. Thinking specifically about coaches, 79% of you reported that the coaching gender breakdown was 75% or more men. And then finally, 100% of refs. 100% of folks said that 75% of refs were men. So again, this is very common across a lot of sports, women's sports, men's sports. It doesn't really matter. This is really what we find, grassroots level, all the way up to the professional level. So what we're seeing here isn't uncommon, but it does illustrate that we have a lot of work to do, which is why we're really excited to be here and work through some of the questions that we have. So one of the questions was, what do you think is the most important goal? Why are we really here? What are we trying to do? So just some things that folks talked about. A lot of people said growing the game or some version of growing the game. So more tournaments, more clinics, more opportunities for folks to engage in playing at whatever level they are. And I really like, I'll show you in a couple slides where folks are talking more about the focus and how the focus needs to be on growing the game for everyone, not just honing in on the best. And I have a quote in here that I really love, the best men's players, right? So the person was saying, we want everyone to be able to participate. So let's create those opportunities. Sustainable, organized, and competitive structure, getting into more countries, which I think we heard from David at the beginning. Again, really trying to grow, become more global. For women to have equal access and equal voice, promoting equity. A lot of folks talked about equity, more opportunities for women across the different player, coach, referee, athletic administrator. So as you're going through the second part of this, refer back to some of these goals, and we'll pull some of these slides back up as Dr. Blair is leading through some of the questions. But based on the feedback from the survey, main goals that we're trying to achieve here and into the future. So there were a number of questions as well about if things were kind of a challenge to meeting those goals. So one of those was gender equity. This is really small. I was hoping it would show up bigger. But blue is those who said yes, gender equity is an issue or a challenge in reaching our desired goals. So you can see again, over 75% of the survey respondents said that gender equity was a challenge to meeting their goals. Something else that really stuck out, 90% of folks said that funding was a challenge in meeting the goals. So something that we specifically want to touch on the second half of this is working through, what does your funding model look like? What does a sustainable funding model look like? And how do we get there, right? How do we take steps to improve funding opportunities across all levels? And then finally, one of the questions we asked about was, what is the biggest challenge? So some of the challenges, again, financing, focus, and this is the quote that I really love, focusing only on the top players versus focusing on growing the game for everyone. a lot of lack of awareness, lack of support, lack of leadership, lack of goals, that sort of thing came up a lot. And then I love this one at the bottom, which is why we're here. Someone just put in all caps, hard to explain. So I'm really excited to figure out what that is, and maybe someone can explain it to me a little bit more while we're here. But that's kind of the purpose of why we're doing it, is so that we can all get in the same room, talk about the challenges, and then figure out kind of how we're going to work through those. So moving into a little bit of the second part of this and thinking through, what do we already know based on research? What do we know based on successful women's leagues that already exist? So that's what we're going to touch on a little bit here.
I can take the
Yeah. Love
clicker.
it. I love it.
I like the clicker. Okay, so given all of this data, right, the local ball hockey community really confirming that male dominated on athletes and the coaches side. Now we want to look towards to what it looks like to actually support women. Okay, and these are just numbers and just data, but we know that there are gender differences in sport participation across the board. However, sport participation is rising, especially in professional sport. And so, as Lizzie just said, we're going to use some of these to really illustrate what this growth really looks like in practice. Okay, so starting off with the WNBA, a 27-year-old league, right? And they're currently experiencing growth in viewership, but also in investment. So when it comes to viewership, you probably can't read all of that, but this past season, they had their highest viewership regular season over the past 15 years. And this season, they are experiencing 67% growth in viewership, right? So that's dramatic increases in viewership. But then also in investments, it's not on the screen, but this past season, they raised about $75 million through having very unique investors. So one is Nike, one is Condoleezza Rice. It's just very unique. And so just really thinking about their strategic approach when gaining investors. So wanted to highlight the WNBA in that route.
I want to show, can you go back to that slide?
Yeah.
So I've included this graph on here specifically because this lists pretty much every major US league. And you can see here that the WNBA finals is one of only 3 events that is seeing increases in viewership. So I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but there is interest in women's sports. So given the opportunity to watch, given the opportunity to engage, folks want those opportunities. However, what sometimes makes it challenging is when you have games and competitions on networks that nobody gets. They're offered at not optimal times, right? So if we're thinking about success for the future, and we'll get into this in ways forward, we have to start prioritizing these experiences because people want them. And I think what we are seeing in the WNBA is really illustrating that.
Absolutely. And I'll stop it, everyone. So talking about that representation matters. You found this tweet, so I think I want you to talk about this tweet, but it's really just talking about, you know, we need to actually see women in the sport to get people more interested. So go ahead.
Yeah, I love this tweet so much. So this is from The Gist. I don't know if any of y'all have heard of The Gist or follow The Gist, but it is a woman-owned company that highlights women in sport. So they send out a newsletter every morning. I love subscribing to it because I don't have to watch like 6 hours of SportsCenter to see like 30 seconds about women's sports. I get a whole newsletter every day about it. But they put out this tweet, and I don't know if you can see it all the way in the back, but it says, it's so funny because my son has been around the WNBA so much. He calls the Timberwolves the boy Lynx, right? So the Lynx are the WNBA team in Minneapolis. The Timberwolves are the NBA team. And what we know is that if we show young boys, young girls, women's sports, they will learn to love it, right? We saw it with the World Cup this summer over the last couple of weeks, and we'll get into some of the problems that we also saw with the Women's World Cup, right? But if we give these experiences to young kids, they will learn to love it. We often see men's sports on TV, and that's why so many folks are drawn to men's sports. But if we can get kids to see games, if we can get them to camps, if we can give them the opportunity to engage in women's sports, to consume women's sports, they will build that same level of fandom that we often see with men's sports.
Yeah.
So this, I also, like Dr. Blair, former college volleyball player. So anytime something about volleyball comes out, I love to see it. So they just announced, this was within the last month, that they are going to televise the NCAA Women's Division I National Championship on ABC for the first time. So there have been in the past some issues with just even getting any of the games televised. But like we see with the WNBA, across women's college sport, we're seeing the same increases in viewership to the point where they moved the national championship so that they could put it on a primetime network and a primetime spot. So they're moving it from Saturday night to Sunday so they can get more folks who are able to view the game, which I think is huge. So again, if we build it, they will come. If we offer these opportunities, folks will engage, folks will tune in. If we offer it at better times, bigger venues. I don't know if anyone follows college volleyball. Nebraska sold out a game that they're playing this upcoming season at their football stadium. So they're trying to break the national attendance record, and they are well on their way. There is the interest. So if we offer the opportunities, folks will come, folks will tune in. This isn't without challenge though. And again, I'm preaching to the choir, but what we did want to talk about as we think about ways forward is what we've seen recently. So I just included 4 recent examples here of instances of mistreatment, harassment, and abuse of women athletes and within women's sports organizations. So the top picture up there, former Olympic gymnast, all victims of Dr. Larry Nassar, right? So we don't need to get into the details of what happened there. I'm sure you all know, but just an instance of how women athletes, even at the highest level, even those like y'all who are representing their country at the highest level, can be mistreated and abused. Recently, news coming out of the National Women's Soccer League of pretty widespread athlete abuse from coaches. They, I think, have done a good job of handling it, firing coaches, kind of taking back some of the control. The women athletes have really had a voice, I think, and use that voice to express how they want change, they're demanding change. So a little bit of a different outcome with that group, but similar experiences of abuse. Obviously, we saw what just happened with the Women's World Cup and Spain's women's national team. Just the most blatant overt abuse. I mean, on national TV, right? People are not afraid. They're not hiding these types of things. And the bottom one, I think, really important, numerous instances of women's athletes prioritizing their mental health and facing scrutiny for it. So Simone Biles is a prime example. She just won her 8th US championship. So you can come back stronger if you take time for yourself. But how are we allowing women athletes to do that? Or are we not allowing women athletes to do that? And so those, I think, are some of the questions that we have here as well to kind of talk through. How are we treating our athletes? What experiences are they having? What do they need more support in? How can we better support them? That sort of thing.
All right, and moving forward, thinking about what supporting women can look like, the first thing I just want to highlight is that we cannot underestimate the power of one's personal brand. So athletes in the room, coaches in the room, an individual's personal brand has the ability to impact whether it's the organization or the sport as a whole. And I think we've seen that through various examples. I like to use Angel Reese as an example, right? She really maximized her moment in the NCAA finals. And from that moment, she has gotten investors from here, there. A light has been shined on women's collegiate sport. And so really supporting women, whether it's through following them on social media, going to their events, just really don't underestimate the power of one's personal brand on the wider sport. That's one thing I want to highlight. Next, allyship. Allyship, as we know, is broad, but I have a shirt that says listen to Black women, but listen to women, number one, right? Just listen to them, see what they need, going to their events, speaking up for whatever they need speaking up for, and just creating safe spaces for women, really, just creating safe spaces for women to help them out. And then lastly, considering intersectionality, it kind of relates to the representation matters piece, but we cannot treat all women the same in a sense within the organization, because some women are moms, right? And they need certain things. Some women are LGBT and they may not feel comfortable in their organizational culture in their local ball hockey community. Also, research shows that athletes of color faces unique challenges as well. So really considering intersectionality in women when it comes to supporting women. So yeah.
And I think one thing we can do with this is we will have some time, like as we're shuffling, share your social media handles, follow each other. It takes $0 to reshare a post that someone makes, right? And so those are the really easy types of things that we can do for free, that take maybe a couple seconds for you to do, but they don't take a huge investment. So help build each other's brands, help share each other's posts, and really be thinking strategically about who's in the room, who's not in the room, who can you support, and that sort of thing as we're thinking of ways forward. So the next piece that I want to go into, as we saw from the survey results, is there is a lack of women in leadership positions. So what are the benefits of women in leadership positions? And we are going to talk about all of that, and give some examples of how we can really build organizations to support women leaders better. So just a couple things that we know. Again, ball hockey is not unique in the fact that women are underrepresented in coaching, athletic administration, pretty much all sport organizations. The WNBA maybe does a little bit better of a job, but still primarily men in those leadership positions. However, data from the WNBA suggests that women are just as successful as coaches. So we have a perception similar to athletes that men are better athletes, men are better coaches, but that's not supported by data. So thinking about how we can use research, and I'm going to push this again, making data-driven decisions. How can we use research? How can we use numbers, collect data, and make those types of decisions that are best for the organization? They sometimes shake things up. They might look a little different than what organizations have done in the past, but based on this data, that's why I'm a huge proponent of using data that you've collected on your organization to help make change as you move forward. There are a ton of benefits, though, to having women in leadership positions. So data on, and this is speaking mostly about Fortune 500 companies, but data with women in leadership positions have a more inclusive culture. They have more family-friendly policies. And at the end of the day, what most organizational leaders really care about, they have a better bottom line. So it's not just those soft skills anymore. We used to only talk about it in this way of kind of the first two data points on there. They had a more inclusive culture. They had more family-friendly policies, but recent literature has suggested that these organizations actually are more profitable. And for a lot of what Dr. Gardner was talking about, thinking about investments, right? There's more creativity when you have folks with differing backgrounds. There's more potential connections when you have folks with different backgrounds, right? So if everybody looks the same, if everyone has the same experiences, it provides you with one avenue for success versus if you're looking at a room of folks who come from different backgrounds, who look different, who have different experiences. Again, this isn't without challenges. So research on women in leadership positions within sport suggests that women experience a lot of challenges as they try to climb the leadership ladder. Things like sexual harassment, bullying, gender discrimination, inclusivity are very rampant within sport organizations. And this is something that I think as a sport management academic community, we're just starting to crack the surface. Because these instances are very challenging to talk about. And it's very hard to get folks who are willing to discuss them because jobs in sport are so coveted. And a lot of people feel like if they are outing their organization as not being inclusive, if they're outing their organization as a place where you experience discrimination or harassment, it's going to come back to them. If you're the only woman in your organization and you report that you were sexually harassed, what's going to happen to you in your future with that organization, right? So I think we're really just starting to tap the surface, but we are ready to ask these types of questions and have these kinds of hard conversations. I want to spend the most time thinking about ways forward, though, because I think this is a really important space to have these conversations about how we can create organizational change. Because again, y'all are the ones with the boots on the ground, you know the policies, you know the cultures. And so I want to go over 3 different things that we can do to create more opportunities for women in leadership positions. So the first one is thinking about career pathways. So creating career pathways for women in coaching and leadership positions. So thinking about what can your organization do to scaffold the experiences of women who are interested in coaching and administration. something like this, right? Investing in spaces where you can have these conversations, doing outreach. I think you're a really great player. Would you be interested in maybe shadowing or taking on an assistant coach role or something like that? How can we grow those opportunities for women? So career pathways are a huge one, assessing organizational culture and barriers, and then focusing on creating positive change. So just some things that we can do for making those data-driven decisions and collecting that data. So collecting and analyzing data. And I always say this doesn't have to be hard. You don't even have to put together a survey. It can be formal conversations where you go up to one of your teammates, one of your colleagues, and say, tell me a little bit more about your experience with X. It can be something as simple as that. It can be a paper and pencil survey that you do at the end of the season with all of the players to say, how was your experience with Y, right? So the more data you have, the better that you can make decisions. So collecting and analyzing that data. And again, experiences and perceptions, workplace policies, that sort of thing. Sharing your findings is huge. Being transparent in what the data is telling you. So this is, I'll give you an example, something that we are struggling a little bit right now. I'm thinking about data that we have on college sport employees. Athletic directors don't want to share information about their organization because they know if a potential employee hears, oh, we don't want to work at, I don't know, I'll use a rival of Temple, Houston. Boo, Houston, I don't know, right? But if you are working for Houston and you're the AD and something comes out that says, oh, Houston doesn't have a great organizational culture, folks aren't going to want to work there, right? So they don't want to share those types of findings. So it's really important that you're transparent in the data that you have about what's happening within your organization. Because then you can use the findings to create new or updated policies. So if everyone is saying they're having the same experience, perhaps it's time to look at that data and say, what can we do differently? How can we make changes and what is necessary? And then continuously evaluating and making more changes. So as we graduate more and more students from our program, we see changes in their preferences. They want more work-life balance. They want the ability to work from home. They want these things that are traditionally different than we've had the opportunity to have in sport. And so we have to constantly, as organizations, as an industry, be evolving in the things that we're doing. And then finally, thinking of more specific ways to create a positive organizational culture, communication is huge. So open and honest communication. And again, not just with your immediate supervisor or the one person who you share an office with, but everyone who's on your team, everyone who you engage with. Building trust is really, really key. And along with that, practicing empathy. When we talk about these at work, our male colleagues always call them the soft skills, right? And so I'm a really firm believer in building those soft skills and continuing to hone in on how are we treating others as humans? How are we thinking about you have kids, or you're a member of the LGBT community, or you're a person of color, right? What unique identities do your colleagues hold? And how are you really bringing that into the workspace and how building that trust, building that rapport, respect, right? Again, respecting everyone's experiences, whether they are the same as yours or different than yours, making everyone feel welcome. And then finally, embracing collaboration and teamwork, which I think is great that we had such a great turnout today. So we can, again, think about ways forward and having those conversations. And then finally, expressing appreciation. So maybe it's a simple text message or a simple email that says, thanks for what you did today, or I thought you had a really great game today, right? So just really going out of your way to make people feel like they're doing a good job when they're doing a good job. Again, doesn't have to be anything fancy. When our students do something great, we try to reward them with pizza. They're very cheap in that way, right? They want a free t-shirt and they want some pizza. That's really all that they want at the end of the day, and an A, right? But we try to do things like that to show them that we really do appreciate their hard work and we understand everything that they have to do. So what I want to do, yeah.
Can I add just one more thing?
Totally.
I don't need to
Okay,
take it for this
all right,
one. Yeah,
all right.
No. I also think it's very important that we lift as we climb, right? So as we're placing our coveted sport leadership positions, right? it's important that, let's say you get elevated from assistant coach to head coach, how can I bring up a woman as I'm in this coveted leadership position? So I just want to highlight that we must lift as we climb. That's what other leagues do, and that's what we need to begin to be doing, is always lift women up as we're up there. That's all I want to say.
All right, so I want to open it up for some questions, comments, conversation, anything like that. And as we move into the next workshop portion of this, we're going to take a quick break and reshuffle our seating, grab some iPads so that we can connect with the folks who are on Zoom. But before we do that, I just want to open it up for questions, comments. I always end class by saying questions, comments, concerns. I don't accept criticism. So anything that you thought was important or maybe especially relevant to this space, we'd love to hear that as we think about the workshop that we're about to engage in.
I would like to thank the like 6 men who are actually here right now. It's a male who actually will step up for you too, so it's not just about women supporting women, it's about men supporting women too. We love you guys.
Come on now, you were in a room with 3 academics up front, so we have strategies to pull conversations out. We have a workshop we're gonna do that's really about engagement, but when you think about this data, like what's going through your mind, even if it's not you don't have a hard question, it's in anything we have to say, we need to get the juices flowing. One of the things that we presented is high level stuff from, stats about WNBA. That's been a 27-year journey. So really understand that, right? That you don't feel like you have to compare yourself and be at a certain pace based on the successes that they are having now, because it's taken 27 years fighting for all types of CBA adjustments. And just now, a few weeks ago, getting private jets to go from one place to the other, being able to be protected and seen as, their male counterparts, right? So what are some things that are going through your mind right now?
Or maybe about the data, maybe you're surprised at the lack of women or not surprised.
I work in the CAI space as well, and I think what we see here in the event that makes sense is we're often preaching to the choir, and I think where the biggest challenge usually is how do we bridge the gap to folks who don't see the world in the better way that we do. You know what I mean? I feel like that's where we sometimes are at. Like, we're in this thing, we know, we believe, we're on the same page, but there's a lot of people out there that don't, and how do we get there? Like, that's, even as someone who works in this space, I still feel like everything.
Yeah, and I think we would agree with that as well. And so part of what we want to come from this, and we've been saying this to San and Karen and Beth, we're not going away. You can't get rid of us just yet. And so after this, I have more data that I want to share, put together, and package it in a way that folks will read and can digest. And we will do that with what we talked about here today as well. So thinking about how can we get the message out there to the folks who aren't in this room and to the folks who maybe aren't even tuning in the Zoom room, thinking about, okay, so next year, what does this look like? Can we get double the number of folks to come in? Can we get 12 men to be here? You know what I mean? So what can we think about are the next steps in building spaces like this out and having these difficult conversations and really engaging with that population who maybe doesn't understand the experiences of women or LGBTQ individuals or folks of color. So I think that is maybe the most important piece of this, is reaching that audience who isn't here today, and how can we approach them to understand these challenges without, I know we when you say DEI, everybody like cringes a little bit, right? Like they're not sure if they want to have those conversations. So how can we approach those conversations in a way that won't have people immediately tuning out? And I think that's some of what we can talk about today as well. Yeah.
Because even if we don't have the folks in the room, it really is about how you empower yourselves to have the message so that you know what to say at what points as you engage different stakeholders at different moments in time. Because doing this kind of work and having this kind of moment, we're here. I know, I don't know all of you, but I know that there are, you got player coaches, administrators. I mean, you're wearing multiple hats and you're living your lives, right? The agenda for where we want to see this organization moving forward could potentially get lost in all those things. Even though you are a messenger, you understand, you're part of the process and you're not, but we get caught. So we all have to kind of remember and then have that, I don't want to say a script, but have that, what are those messages that I need to send out when I'm in front of a potential sponsor. I have an opportunity to go to my local recreation center. It's been down there. I've never gone. You're messengers, but when you think about youth and building the sport, say to yourself, have I gone to my local recreation center and said, hey, I want to bring a group of women that play, ball hockey to do an exhibition here? How many of you have done that? How many of you have local recreation centers near you? Come on. Right? So whether or not we are, we understand what needs to be done, how do we empower ourselves to take those moments of time to step into the situation and do those things? And so part of that is, kind of debriefing around a little bit of that today.
I have a question. Can you guys hear me? Is this mic working? No, it's not working. Okay. So it's working on Zoom. Okay. I'll just speak up then. Okay, so my question is twofold, and you kind of addressed it a little bit, but what do you say to people who say, well, men's sports are more exciting to watch because they're better athletes, number one. And number two, they bring in more money, so they deserve more opportunities.
The
My
nice
first
version?
thought. Can I say something?
You go first, you go first.
Watch some women's sports, first of all. Don't tell me that and then tell me you've watched a softball game. You're a little leaguer, right? So the visibility that we're getting now is helping to debunk that. I can't tell you how many of our male students and some of our counterparts that have said, now that I see the games on these channels and I'm actually watching it, oh my God, running a play that is not just up and down the court dunking, so we have to create opportunities for people to see so that they can develop this new appreciation. I was watching a game and I saw this little boy getting ready to get the autograph of one of the players, and he was looking at it. And I'm like, this is what we need to move women's sport along, that we had this little kid at this game getting this autograph and so jazzed about it. That's going to move things along. And we've already kind of debunked the notion that, to be good, like the whole resource piece, the money piece. Soccer is the perfect example of that. Soccer, women's
Football.
I do know we have an international audience and I need to, I stand in the chat. Oh, soccer. Oh, there's soccer. Can I go there? You got me. Now but the idea that we're bringing in that money, more viewership from a US perspective, right? And we look internationally when we know that our women for basketball are going abroad and making six figures. So all of these are just misnomers out there. They're not really complete and total facts. So I think as we start to provide the great research and get this information out, so we can start to change the narrative that when we're talking, we'll be able to move on.
And I think to add to that, there is a lot of, I think, comparison between men's and women's sports, right? And it doesn't have to be like that. We don't have to say, oh, Brittany Griner doesn't do what LeBron James does, or so-and-so doesn't do what this player does. Oh, I mean, I could do that the opposite way. There is no male equivalent to Simone Biles, and there never will be, right? She is the greatest of all time. And that's fine because men and women do things differently and the games are different. And I think we can appreciate them in different ways. If there are comparisons, though, I think we do have to understand how men's sports, so the WNBA and the NBA are a perfect example.
Mhm.
The NBA has been around for much longer than
50
the
years.
WNBA has
50
had,
years, yeah.
right? And so if we compare where the NBA was in year 27,
Mhm,
the WNBA is actually financially in a better spot.
mhm.
But a lot of people want to forget that's how it was 25 plus years ago, right? And so again, I think having this information is really powerful to show if we build it, they will come. If you provide the opportunities, folks will tune in. If you provide the opportunities, athletes will show up. They want to play and they want to watch. But we, again, have to provide those opportunities and the data to back it up, right? So I think, again, a lot of it is misinformation, but our students will come at us hard with that misinformation, right? About how these games are more exciting or the viewership is better or those numbers are wrong or that sort of thing. So I think too, being confident in what you're saying and okay, if you think men's sports are better, cool. I'm going to watch women's sports and so are all my friends in this room and on Zoom, right? So making them feel like, oh, well, maybe I should tune in. Maybe I should try it out. Maybe it is just a little bit different and how can I appreciate it in a different way? I think are really important conversations that we can start having.
I didn't hear that. I didn't even hear him.
I caught pieces of that. Can you repeat that again?
I'm not sure I completely understand the question.
Like how to be proactive versus
Reactive.
the ability to verbalize, I guess. Like, we have to be able to verbalize things that don't have to. I don't know if that's exactly what it means,
Okay.
To learn to, it seems now it's reactive. Like, so this happens, okay, so we have to change this, but versus the proactive, so you have to be able to be proactive. You almost feel someone's like you're making a problem before there's even a problem, just to look for equity, and that's been some of my experience here, like I know people. And if you go back to Laval last year, the order of the championships game was gonna be men's A, men's B, women's A. And of course, as soon as we see that, what, you know, like what, but how can we, you know, use communication that the male, it doesn't seem that the male's counterparts have to do to try to set the stage as equal as you can before things start, especially events with more than one gender in.
Yeah, that's a really great point. The amount of, oh yeah.
It's also suggesting like there are behavioral standards for women.
Mhm.
So.
Totally.
In the sense that you should smile while you're playing sports. You should not be as aggressive as men are. You should be polite and kind and meek and soft and all these things, these cultural ideals of womanhood.
Mhm.
Is he suggesting that we have to deal with those interpersonal skills more, and how do we combat that? Like, oh, just smile, it'll be better.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's the amount of there's a lot of names for it, unpaid labor, emotional labor, right? That women have to go through to, like you're talking about, express why certain things are an issue when men don't have to do that, or why didn't I smile? Why was I aggressive, right? Why was it not okay for me to play this way when it is okay for men to play that way? I don't have the answer to that. I wish that I did. But I think, again, like these sorts of forums, communication, expressing just asking questions and feeling like you're in a space where you can ask questions. To say, well, why was it like this? Why was it men's A and then men's B and then women's A, right? Okay. Yeah, no, and that's the thing. You shouldn't even have to ask, right? But are we engaging in that work to make the change? Because hopefully it won't happen like that again in the future. So there are, and this is again across the board, in a lot of workplaces, in a lot of sports, women do have to do that emotional labor, that extra work, that unpaid work, because they are sometimes an afterthought. Our events are an afterthought, our sports are afterthoughts. So yes.
I'll add to that. It really does have to be a two-pronged approach here. It has to be a woman understanding her worth and her place, and understanding that in the context of where you are. I think that was one of our international, if I'm not mistaken, one of our international participants. I mean, we've got several nations that are represented across sport. And from a cultural context, women and men and our roles and all of those things vary very differently. What's happening in the US in terms of women movement is very different. In Spain is very different in your African countries. So women, when we step into our own selves and being where we want to be and getting comfortable in that journey, we have to make some decisions around how we want to present ourselves. And sometimes you're going to have to present yourself in a way understanding that you are in an uncomfortable situation and you are going to make people uncomfortable and getting comfortable with them. You know, and that was said so much during COVID. Get ready for the uncomfortable situations, right? Yeah, that is very real. And so sometimes you go home at night and you feel a little beat up. Well, you're making it better for yourself and you're making it better for people that come behind you. So to deal with the inequities that we experience every day and that we know are historical around gender kind of norms, we have to change the narrative of that in the room. And the men in the room have to be prepared to understand the changes coming. It may be slow in certain countries, in certain situations, it may be very fast and hard in others, but understand that there is a momentum and desire to change that. So we got a lot of internal work that we need to do to step into our own space, understand our worth, and every day take, even if it's a quarter of an inch forward and inserting yourself and at your comfort level, you've got to do that. That's your first approach. The second approach is an organizational approach. And that is hopefully some of the things that we'll get to in the second part. How are we assessing the organizations that we are in? And I would challenge you to not only think about this person and this, in the organizations that are represented now, you all work in an organization, right? What's happening in that organization? Because the change has to be in every type of institution that's working out there. We're going to get from point A to point B. It can't just be happening in the WNBA. It can't just be happening in tech. It has to happen in a lot of places at whatever pace that it needs to happen and needs to happen. I think once we open the door to those kinds of conversations where we as women are going to say, if I feel a moment I would need to be aggressive and raise my voice, then I need to be aggressive and raise my voice, knowing that depending on who's in that space, that may come across okay, or someone is going to be offended. Every day, I'm offended at some point about something. Someone parked in the spot that I wanted to get in. Someone's looking at some sort of way. So you know what? Kind of embrace all that, know how to shake that off and keep it moving. But we all have to understand our roles and the organizations that we are in within the sport and within our professional personal lives, and be ready to take some risks and do some things that might seem uncharacteristic for women or yourself, and know that it'll be okay. The first time that I said a dirty word in my classroom, it was, for me, it was, you say, "It's curse in classroom." Well, sometimes, you gotta drop down. Here where folks are, so we were having conversations, and I wanted it to be open. And I don't think that level of aggression, and I didn't curse anybody out, but you have to say some words to get folks' attention before it was a moment for them to, okay. It was complete and total respect after that. We were able to talk to each other. They understood. I'm not gonna be walked over. how we're gonna flow, and if there's something that I think I need to say, I'm gonna be as respectful as possible, but I don't think that you're getting it. I'm gonna take a little closer to that line and say it in another way to like get your attention, and then we get to this happy place we can work together. Like, that's the uncomfortable piece of it all.
Question, just, I always make them, but to go back to the point that you made about like platform. I do some work at home with that really nice. So. We have spent like, we spent some time in.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Spent about 2 years trying to rebuild. What was kind of like a flat line, like it was okay. Nothing really spectacular. Up to something that like we wanted people to take notice of. And this year was when we made our finals week in the playoffs and then not just the teams turn up, they play each other, it's an event. The players feel like they deserve that. And they get an event that they feel like that it's worth something. It's not just turn up and they play a game and go. And the first year since it's existed, it's been monetized. So we charged a small entry fee for spectators. That was like trying to deal with parents telling them they have to pay to come in and watch the kid. But they paid. The people paid to watch women's hockey, and some really good women's hockey as well. And before it took place, there was quite a lot of I wouldn't say negativity, but that feeling of like, well, people aren't going to pay to watch that. And they did. A lot of people paid to watch that, and we had a live stream for the first time that people paid to watch, and people turned up on the day and paid on the door to watch. And I think our best attended games were the U16 girls, which was for them to have their own round robin format and a final for the first time since that league has existed. And it wasn't just people's parents or little brothers running around waiting. There were people turning up specifically for those games. People on the live stream commenting, people on social media commenting, sharing. We put the games on YouTube for free after the event. People were sharing those clips, and the media teams could access that content. And I was at an IHF conference in February. And one of the things was access to that content, because people don't want to pay like $20 or £25 or €20 to access stuff so they can create that really useful content for their own social media. Like you're charging that team, your own team, $20 or £20 to have a 20-second clip for a social media post. And they can't even, if they can't, how do we create access to that really quality content so they can advertise their own teams, and they can advertise the games, and they can advertise their own players and add sign-ins and have game footage and make it exciting so that when that time of year rolls around again, or those big games rolling around, people do want to pay to watch. And they go, oh, I've seen that player on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok. How can that be more accessible, be released by the federations as well, not just it shouldn't be the club's individual responsibility to make that for themselves. The governing bodies should have libraries of resources where they can create their own social media content and it be really professional. So when those events roll around, the big games and the league winning game of the season, people are turning up and they're paying that like £5 on the door because they want to see their favorite player in that exciting game they saw a clip of 2 weeks ago. I mean, I don't know what the answer to that is at the moment, but we noticed we got so much more traffic through the door, so much more traffic online through having really like quality social media that was free. And it was free for the clubs to take those clips and images and photography and everything and create these really great things they can put on their own pages. That next time they go, oh, how can we come and watch that? Or when's your next home game? We had people contacting clubs saying, oh, we want to come down and watch you at your home rink. Where do we find the information? So that had like a really, really big impact. We didn't want to lose the momentum from that like one weekend that we did, because now we're coming into the next season. We've kind of got trying to get those teams like on that platform again to keep them rolling until the next playoff weekend. And the teams that weren't even at playoff weekend, like how do they get their status elevated? How do we advertise them? So that would be kind of a question, but also a point of just saying that people want to watch it. They do want to know, how do you give them clubs from a governing body perspective or a league management perspective the resources to create those packages and advertise themselves in a really professional way that I don't want to compare it to the men's game, but they have that. And you can log in and look at something, you can follow the TikTok about that thing. And I just feel like that's where some of that platform lies. Creating a much bigger awareness of it, and giving the players a feeling of like legitimacy as well. I'm on TikTok and I'm kind of a big deal. Like, yeah, you should be a big deal. So yeah, that was the point.
Yeah, that's a really great point because I think a lot of, especially the younger generations do a lot on social media. And so I think something that might be useful is sharing if you have numbers about how many people tuned in, how many people were there in person, how much money you charge, how much money you generated, right? So yeah,
It's one of the best things I've ever done in my whole life, but I remember everything.
yeah. So if you can share that with them and say, you know, we want to continue this moving forward. That's again my plug for data, because numbers don't lie, right? If you say for the first time ever we charged and we had the biggest crowds and we had the biggest crowds online and there was, you know, conversation going and we had, you know, if you can look back and like use examples of people like posting about it on social media or that sort of thing. That's where I think you can really start to get the buy-in from the leagues to hire someone, right? To hire someone from marketing, or they probably have someone in marketing who they could send to each of the teams for a day or something like that to help create that content. We have really been pushing our students to learn some of the like technology platforms. So whether it's Canva or Photoshop or that sort of thing, so that they can go to their organization and say, oh, hey, I could do that as my, like, add that to my job duty. I have this in my skill set, or just for themselves, our athletes at Temple. We have some branding courses that they take and they learn those skills so that they can take their headshot or a clip of the game, or they can cut a clip of the game and post that on social media. So that's what we've been really pushing with our students lately, to like hone their tool belt of those skills, because TikTok and Instagram and those social media platforms are really, I think, the way forward in a lot of advertising. Yeah.
The attention span of that 1 minute. as well.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That 1 minute. But a reel or a TikTok.
for sure. Yep.
We had some really good stuff with the 1 minute swipe, and then the next thing.
Okay,
Swipe.
yeah.
Like,
Mhm.
it's always like swipe more.
Yep.
We managed to get quite a lot of that actually.
It's awesome.
On the Sunday, Saturday, always saw it.
Hmm.
They paid, still paid $5.
Yeah,
We invested, I think, US dollars, equivalent of about $1,000 back into the event for next year.
that's awesome.
For the first time.
Hmm.
So, but a lot of that came through our social Twitter as well. It's
Yeah,
a really big, like, just with the game updates.
Yep.
Like, Twitter.
that's awesome.
Are there any more questions?
Yeah, it's just time for the break. Yeah.
Yeah,
So we're gonna give you about a 15-minute break, and then we're gonna come back and do a little work that might actually bring us up to some of what you're saying about how do we know that there's this platform for social media. For those of you that hear, there's a platform for social media and content to share out, so that we can talk about and share, get some enthusiasm that we know that's at the men's level, but we don't have those resources. Right, so how can we, from an organization standpoint, think about dispersing some of those things, how to work together? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take like a 15-minute break. And just by show of hands, so that I get a sense of the room, how many of you are strictly athletes? Where are my athletes here? Athletes only. You have a coach's hat, and you wear a coach's hat as well. Okay, you might slash it. Yes, yes, yes. Today, in this moment, in this time for this event, yeah. And then my administrators. Where are my administrators? Okay. Because what we're gonna do is we may shift the room a little bit, or what we're gonna do is identify tables where we want just the athletes. right? We're gonna ask you to kind of assemble yourselves. Those of you that are administrators or wear some sort of administrative hat, we're gonna ask you to sit at the table. And those of you that are in the coaching role, we're trying to really capture the three main stakeholders that might be represented here: the athlete, the coach, the administrator. And we're gonna just work through a series of questions, you know, kind of debriefing a little bit about or having you think about what we talked about this morning, and then come up with some thought. Don't get yourself all, you know, kind of nervous, like, oh my God, we're gonna do some work. This is free flowing, you know, we're not, no pressure, just conversation amongst yourselves. Because I think there could be some really juicy morsels just in the comments that we're hearing. There's ideas already floating in the room that just don't have the legs to get them moving yet. And we'll try to be able to, you know, pull that together for you. So we'll take a 15-minute break, and then as we come back, we'll tell you where we're gonna sit. Thank you.
Also know, there's unlimited soda over here, so if you guys want any like other water or.